questions that were asked to me in my recent Salesforce interview. But before getting started, I would like to announce that I have started an comprehensive integration course in which I am doing integration with almost four different systems, and I'm going to explain what are the different types of the integration, how to make call out to all of these types of the integrations, and how to get and post the data to the external systems, how to understand the JSON, like the fifth point as you can see, which is a very important one, how to understand the JSON and convert it into the required format so that you can insert it within the Salesforce, and what is the use of JSON.Deserialize, JSON.Deserialize exposing the resources to the external system. And one more important thing is that I have done an integration with and system with the help of which you can send the SMSs. Okay, you can send the SMSs to anybody, so you can surely watch it, but only keep in mind that this is only REST type of integration. I'm not doing any kind of SOAP integration, and also you must at least have beginner level knowledge of Apex, at least. Only if you have this above two things, only then go ahead and look into this course, else don't do it, because at least get some knowledge of about Apex. And these are the points that I'm covering in this overall session. There are more to it, but in much more detail, but this is just an overview. Okay, so let's get started with the first question. And the first question says that what are the different types of the flows. So as they went through my resume, okay, I've done a lot of work on flows, right? So the first question that they asked to me is that what are the different types of the flows that you have worked on, or what are the different types of the flows. So I have worked on multiple type of the flows, so I described the flow, type of the flow. So for an example, there is a screen flow, a record trigger flow, auto launch flow, field service lightning mobile flow, which is a part of a template, omni channel flow. So these are the different types of the flows. I told I I would always recommend that if you are going for an interview, just don't tell what they have asked for. For an example, what are the different types of the flows? I could have said auto launch flow, record trigger flow, screen flow, and that's it. But I did not stop there. I explained them where I did use each of these flows. So for an example, screen flows, I used to show the PII data of the customer. That is one of the important thing. A record trigger flow, I had to build a trigger, but that could have been possible with the help of the record trigger flow as well. So that's why I went with the record trigger flow. Auto launch flow, I used it within the iSend bot to make the decisions. Field service lightning mobile flow, I used it within the field service lightning mobile app, so that to show again the PII data of the customer. So I explained them where did I use them, and also what are the different types of the flows. So this was the answer to the first question. Let's move on to the next one. So can we run a flow in with sharing or without sharing context, and if yes, how? Now I have already covered these things, that how to run a flow in a user context or the system context, but I'll again show over here. I have not created any flow. Okay, so you can easily create one flow. Let's call it as a record trigger flow, and let's call it as account object whenever a record account is created, and that's it. Let's save it. I'm going to name it something, and let's save it. Now if you have saved your flow, I think so there is some error, but over here in this icon, if you go and click on show advanced, here you can select in which mode you have to run the flow. Where it is, one second. Enter the template, override. I think so it's not activated, that's the reason why. Okay, nothing is, but basically if you can directly go to this particular start, this icon, you can click on show advanced. You can find out over here that you can run a flow within the user context and the system context as per as need. Okay, so this is the place where you can run a particular flow within with sharing and without sharing. I explained the same thing. You can go to that setting icon and you can select whether you have to run it with sharing or without sharing. So let's move on to the next question, that is, I have a flow that updates the field of the case whenever a case is created. And because of that, the owner of the case is changed to ABC queues. And we did that for the routing purposes. Now, while bulk uploading the data, we want this automation must not run and shall not update the owner of the case. because we wanted it to assign this case manually. How can we stop this? So the question is something like, what happens is, there is a field on the case. Okay, whenever a case is created, automatically the owner gets changed to an ABC queues. Okay, and that they have done it for the routing purposes. Now, while bulk uploading the data, they don't want to automate the routing. Instead, what they want to do is they want to manually assign the case to each of them. But because of this automation within the flow, the reason is what's happening over here is that the owner is again getting changed to ABCQ, but they don't want this. They want it to be ABC, not ABCQ, but the integration user or whichever user they are uploading from. So that's what they wanted. How can we do it? So here, what I proposed is that you can create a checkbox. Okay, within that object, let's say account, let's say case object. Okay, so you will create a checkbox. Okay, like bulk upload checkbox. And what's going to happen is that this bulk upload checkbox, the same condition of the bulk upload checkbox, you're going to check it within the flow as well. Like for an example, if bulk upload equals to true, then don't run this particular automation. Okay, you can skip this particular automation within the flow itself. And then while bulk uploading the data, just check this checkbox and upload the data. So as this checkbox will be checked and the automation skips, when automation is completely skipped when this checkbox is checked, in that cases automatically what's going to happen is that the records will be bulk uploaded, while the automation won't run without even hampering the existing functionality or without even deactivating the flow. So this was the solution that I proposed. So you can also find it in my previous videos. I have created videos around this as well in my interview videos. So let's move on to the next question, that says, what are the best practices of the flows? So he just asked me only one best practice of the flows, but I gave him multiple. So one of them is nothing but, you cannot do, like you cannot insert an update, or you cannot do a DML, or you cannot get the records within the for loop itself, because the limit over here is 2000s. You can only get 2000 records using in for loop using the flows itself. Okay, that is one of the thing. Second of the thing that I always see is that what people do is that they query the record type by passing the hard coded ID. But as soon as the org changes, what's going to happen is that the overall flow will start working. It won't work. Basically the ID is not matchable, right? The ID is not recognizable. So in that cases, what users should do is that whenever you're trying to query a record type ID, okay, you want a record type, basis on of the record type ID, you want a particular record, query it from directly from the record type object. Okay, there is a record type object, you can directly query from that, and then you can get the ID, so that it will work perfectly fine in every org. Next, third more important thing that I've give as a best practice is that, let's say your flow is very much complex and it has too much of complexity, right? And if it has too much of complexity, what you can do is that you can divide it is within the subflow. Okay, and using that subflow you can reduce the complexity by dividing the overall interaction or overall transaction into smaller part. Okay, so the third point that I gave is that use the subflow or something like that. Okay, so that I gave the three best practices instead of one. Let's move on to the next question, that says that, when do we use name credentials and when do we use remote site settings? So this is again an integration question, and if you have actually have knowledge when to use name credentials, when to use remote site setting, only then you can answer this question. So in a very brief, I would like to explain that whenever you are going to log into a system, okay, let's example for an example, if I want to log into Facebook and I want to pull the data from Facebook, and because I need to log into that system, I need username and password of that Facebook. And in that cases where I will need the username and password, I will go with name credentials. On the other hand, if it's an open system, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use remote site setting by just registering the website to the remote site settings and making a call out. Okay, so that's what I gave the answer, because I have knowledge, like I have been through, or I have actually experienced this kind of thing, so I was able to answer this question. So I have also shown it in my within my integration course, how where to use name credentials, where to use remote site settings, so you can always check it out. So let's move on to the next question, that says that, let's say when we are making a call out to system and that's a login based system, hence we need an access token from the end system. What approach will you use and why? Now whenever you are going to make a call out to an external system, if possible, we can go to auto draw. Okay, so the interview question says that, let's say this is Salesforce, this is external system. Okay, now it's a login based external system. Okay, you need you login and username and password to in order to pull the data or push the data to that system. Now for that purpose, you just cannot pull the data whatever you want to. First you need to authenticate yourself with that system. Sorry, yeah, you need to authenticate yourself with that system, and then what happens is that system is going to generate an access token and give it to you. And after that, using that same access token, you can go ahead and pull and push the data if you want to. Okay, so what is the approach that you're going to use? So one of the approach is that there are two ways you can get the access token. One is using remote site settings as well. Basically what you need to do is you need to do the authentication within Apex code itself, which is a little bit risky because access token keeps on changing. So you can do the access token, you can take the specified parameters, you can go through the documentation of an integration like whichever system you are doing the integration with, you can go through the documents and you can understand, okay, these are the parameters that I need: client ID, client secret, and by passing that I can generate the access token. And as soon as I generate the access token, I have to use that access token on every call. But if you want to don't do that, like if you don't want to do that, there is one more way that what you can do is you can you can provide the client ID and client secret within the name credentials, and that name credentials is going to generate an access token on your behalf, and then you don't need to pass access token anyway. Okay, you can just use that name credentials and automatically the access token will be passed on every call out. So this was the approach. I went with the approach of name credentials. I explained them why I'm not using remote site settings one, and I also explained them if it's a login based system, how am I going to do that. So that's the thing. Let's move on to the next question that says that, okay, so this was the JSON that they gave me. Okay, they will send you over the chat and they will ask you to share your screen, and they asked me how do I insert this particular record within Salesforce. So this is the JSON I'm going to get from the external system. What will I do in order to insert that record within Salesforce? Now the answer to this question is I can just use JSON.Deserialize, and I can, let's say this JSON is stored within a string JSON body, right? I can directly deserialize it. I can convert it in the form of list of objects, right? And then it's converted in the list of object by deserializing, I can loop over each of the object one by one, and then I can insert the data. Like for an example, account acc equals to new account, nacc.name. I will get it from obj.get name or something like that, right? So this is how I will convert that overall JSON and I will insert it within my Salesforce org. Okay, but actually I've explained how to understand that JSON and I can convert it into the required format in my course as well. You can understand it properly. How did I read that JSON and I convert it into a required format? Okay, in the next question they asked me much more complex JSON. Now to be very honest, this is not the exact JSON but the pattern is same. Okay, there was one JSON within JSON, and there was square braces, and the same JSON was repeated twice thrice, but right now I'm just repeating twice. So if you can see, there is a name, phone number, and address. Again there's a name, phone number, and address, and then they asked me how are you going to insert that particular record within Salesforce. Now if I look into that JSON quickly, okay, first of all there are square braces, so basically this is a list. Okay, this is not one record but actually this is a list of records. It should have been not like this, I think so. It should have been, yeah, okay, fine. So it's not one record but it's a list of record. That is point number one. Okay, so first of all I'm going to get a list. From that list I need to get the map. Okay, that is name and test name. Okay, once got the map, again if you go inside, address is also again returning map. Okay, so the JSON, if I read out the JSON, it's somewhat like this: list of map of string comma map of string comma object. So I decoded this particular JSON in this particular format, okay, using this I read it through the JSON and I understood, okay, it's a list of map of string comma map of string comma object. And I what I did was I decoded it and then I looped over it each of this list and map one by one, and I inserted that particular record within Salesforce. I used JSON.Deserialize I also explained that I've used JSON.Deserialize because the fields, okay, the nodes that I'm seeing right now does not matches with my Salesforce of fields API. So that's the reason why I went with JSON.DeserializeUntyped. But I am again explaining it within my course in very depth, so you can also look into it. But in very simple terms, first of all, it was a list. Okay, so that's why I gave list outside, and after that I went within the map, that is map of name comma test comma name. So that's a map. Okay, so again that's why I went with the map. Again within the map there is an address which has again key value pair. So that's why I gave it map of string comma object within the map of string. So this was the answer to this question. Let's move on to the next question that says that can you tell me what are the different types of the authentication protocols that you have used? Honestly, I explained them. I've used OAuth 2.0 and I have never used JWT, but I have used OAuth 2.0 and I most probably showed them or went through this particular diagram. Okay, always if you are going for an interview, I would recommend you to go through this particular diagram. So but basically client system is going to send an authorization request, we're going to get a grant, and from that grant we are going to get an access token, and from that access token we can access the resources. Okay, it's just making a request, getting a grant, and then getting an access token and accessing the protected resources. That's all. Okay, so I explained this over 2.0 in this particular manner. Okay, and I honestly don't know about JWT, so I told them I don't know. I know about the words, but I don't know how to use them. So let's move on to the next question that says that can you suggest me a brief of a solution where we can find a track of all the failures that has happened over a period of time, or we can track all the failed events while using Salesforce. Also, clearing of the data must happen time to time. Now, according to this question is that, like when you are going to build an automation within Salesforce, there are multiple places where your Salesforce is going to fail, it's going to throw an error. So they want to capture all these errors, okay, and they want to show it. Okay, so how would you do it? Okay, so for that what I said is that I will create an error event log object, right? And every time I write a code, okay, there will be a try catch block. And whenever there is a catch block, okay, I will insert a record inside error event log object, right? And there will be a tab of this error event log object. Okay, so whenever there will be a catch, there will be an error, we will insert the record within this particular object with the message and all that stuff. And once that is done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an LWC component on top of that, this particular object, tab of this object. Okay, tab LWC. So I would be able to get a more comprehensive view and basically a good list view of this error event log object. I can filter the records as per as the need of the error event log object. Okay, and once that is done, so basically what's going to happen is that every time our code is going to run into the catch, I'm going to insert the record within this particular object, and what it's going to do is that it's going to keep a track of all the errors that I'm facing throughout the time. And also I will write an scheduled apex class. What it's going to do is it's going to run, let's say after every 3 years, what it's going to do is it's going to delete the records or error event log object. Okay, as soon as it finds out, okay, error event log object records before 3 years, whatever records are there, it will just go ahead and delete it. Okay, and it will run every day. Every day we will have only 3 years of data. After that it will delete rest of the records, so that our Salesforce data is also maintained. So that's what solution I gave in this particular question. So let's move on to the next question that says that let's move on to the next question that says when we use database.query locator versus when do we use iterator. Now, uh, query locator basically is used to query the records. Okay, for an example, you have some records and you just want to bluntly query the records. That's where you use query locator. But if you want to control the iteration on very granular level, that's where we go with iterator. Okay, first is, okay, so when we want to control the iteration on granular level, we go with iterator. Okay, Second is that very important one. Okay, query locator has limit of 2000 scope size. Okay, maximum 2000 can be the scope size in case of database.query locator. But what if you want to go beyond 2000? Here again you can use iterator. Okay, so if you want to go the size of the scope beyond 2000, that's where you go with the database.iterator or iterator. So these are the two questions or two points that I mentioned in the video. You can also add more to it if you want by going to my comment section. Now next is write a batch class which will pass all the failed records to the next batch for reprocessing. Okay, so let's say I have a batch A and batch reprocessing. So what I want to do is whatever records that are going to fail within batch A are going to get processed within batch reprocessing. So I will extends or implement, sorry, implements. I'm not writing the whole code, but I'm just showing you execute, finish. So I did not only implement database.batch, but I also implemented stateful in this case. Okay, so that I can maintain the state. So using query locator, I queried the record. Okay, next in execute, inside try catch, what I did was I created a variable, let's say and then I took this record ID and inside catch block I populated the IDs within it. Okay, whichever records that are failed, I'm going to actually take the IDs of it, and within finish method of the batch, let's say I'm going to go to the batch reprocessing. Okay, I'm going to first of all implement the database.batchable here as well. Here what I'm going to do is I'm first of all going to implement a constructor which is going to take a id as a parameter. Okay, string id or ids. Okay, again I'm going to implement as stateful. Here I will keep list of ids new. Let's consider this way: id is new, and all the ids that I'm receiving dot, sorry, not id is new, id is new dot add ids. Right, I'm going to take it right away over here, and then inside the start method of this query based on ids, this particular id is new. And even before that, what I need to do is I need to call this batch rep, and here I'm going to pass the records field, and once that is done, it should be list of ids, I think so. Yeah, so once that is done, I will database.execute batch. Okay, so what I'm basically doing over here is that I created a batch class A and batch class B. I queried the records that I wanted. I executed it in try catch block, and I've captured the failed records, and the all whatever the failed records are, I'm passing it to the next batch, which we will call it as rep, through the parameter, and basically that's nothing but a constructor. So automatically through this constructor will pass all the failed IDs and insert it within the next batch. You will take it to the next batch and you will query the next records that are failed or the failed records inside the start, and you're going to fetch it and process it again. So that's what the answer that I gave for this particular question. So let's move on to the next question that asks that how to make a call out from an asynchronous apex. Now, honestly, if you want to, it's a pretty simple question. If you want to make a call out from a future apex, okay, if you want to make a call out from an asynchronous apex, you can always use at the rate future call out equals to true. And one more important thing, I told them that the future methods must be static, they must be void. Okay, so first of all, the answer to this question is at the rate future call out equals to true. Also explain them, it must be static, void, no primitive. Okay, so that's what I said. The method must be static, they must be void, there should be no primitive data type as a parameter. Now as soon as I said that, okay, no primitive data type as a parameter, they asked me the next question that can we pass a objects as a parameter to the future apex? And my answer to this was no. Honestly, I was not able to answer this question. Okay, so they asked me like will you be able to insert the record of as an s objects to the, like, can you pass the s objects to the future apex? And my answer to this question was practically no, we should not be able to. But he said that we are able to. Okay, but then I said that okay, we can use what we call queuable apex, but he said that I don't want to use queuable apex, I only want to use future apex. How would you do it? And now I was confused, already gave up. So the answer to this question is that you need to first of all stringify the records that you're going to pass as an s object, and you can pass the stringified versions of the record via parameter. And once you have passed that stringified version of the records, okay, then you can take that records, you can deserialize it, and again you can process it further. Okay, so yes, you can pass s objects by stringifying the records. Okay, so that's why I came up with this idea. Like, I did not know about this, so he gave me that idea actually. Okay, so let's move on to the next question that says that can you tell me any apex pattern that you have used? Okay, so honestly, I did use a few of the apex patterns. Are we always use trigger handlers, right? You might have seen we don't write the whole code within trigger itself. So instead of that, what we do is that we divide the overall code into a trigger and a trigger handler. Trigger handler is nothing but an apex class. So what we do is we write the overall code within the apex class and we just call it from the trigger, right? So one of the pattern is that. Second pattern is fflib pattern. Now many of the people might not know about it. Fflib pattern. So here you do query within another class, okay, for loops in another class, dmls in another class, okay. We call it selector class, domain class, and service class and all that stuff. Okay, so you do all these things in a different class. Okay, so a query within different class, for loops within different class, dml within different class, and calling trigger is also in within different class. So this is the fflib pattern that I used. I will create a video, detailed video on fflib pattern, how to use that, how to install the package of it, and how to work with it. Okay, I'll surely create a video on top of it. But I did use fflib pattern, so I had an advantage telling about this fflib pattern. Okay, so let's move on to the next question that says that you are running a system and it's working fine, but when you run the test classes for the same, you get CPU time limit exceed error. What could be the possible reason? Now again, for this kind of questions, uh, basically if you're working, if you're particularly like executing a particular code, it's working absolutely fine. And the reason it's not working fine is that because whenever you're running the test classes, it's getting CPU time limit exceed error. The CPU time limit exceed error you get when you take more than 10 seconds to process a particular transaction. Okay, when you're particularly executing a transaction and it takes more than 10 seconds, that's where you get that error. Now if in normal terms, if it is not getting, and it's getting in only in test classes, so basically maybe I'm creating a record multiple times, same records I'm creating multiple times, and because of that, within the same transactions multiple records are getting created and it's taking a lot more bigger time. That can be one of the possible reason. Second of the possible reason is we need to actually refactor the code, which is a time consuming one. So I said the same answer. It can be wrong as well, you can always correct me in my comment sections. So I said that two ways. One of them is nothing but maybe I can use a test data factory. Using that, I will insert only record once. I won't insert the record multiple times by just directly using the test data factory, one of the way. And second of the way, I said that I would refactor the code. Even if I'm getting that kind of error, I need to refactor the code so that to reduce the time limit exceed error. Okay, so this was the answer to this question that I gave. Let's move on to the next question. Now, this was regarding the LWC. Now in LWC, that they asked me multiple questions which I have already covered in my previous video, but I like to highlight these particular questions. Like, in case if you are using track annotation, what if we have a nested array, like you have declared an array as test. So for an example, let's say I have an array like this. Okay, so and within that array you have a nested array like new, an address and value and something like that, right? Will that be reactive as well? So the question was, see, by default the properties are reactive, but we give track to the properties which are objects or array type. Okay, now they asked me that if it's a nested array, and will the whole nested array will be reactive, or only test will be reactive, or only new will be reactive, or test and new or address whole thing is going to be reactive? What would be the answer to this question? Now, honestly, I did not know at that time, and I answered that the whole array is going to be reactive. I still today don't know whether it's a correct answer or not. You can always correct me in my comment section. But the answer to this question I gave is that the whole array is going to be reactive. Okay, the whole array is going to, the test, new, and address, all these things are going to be reactive. That's what I said in that interview question. Okay, he did not reply back anything, but yeah, I think so. Most probably it's right, but I am not sure. Okay, you can always correct me. Let's move on to the next question that says that what are the different ways we can call a parent component from the child? Okay, so there are two ways. One is via HTML markup. This is one of the way, via HTML markup, and one using custom events. Okay, one of the ways, okay, custom events is one of them, via HTML markup is one of them. No, sorry, one of them is add event listener. Okay, so there are two ways you can call a parent component from the child: via HTML markup, that's what we use inside the custom event as well. Okay, when we fire a custom event from child to parent, and that's what we call as via HTML markup, we write an on keyword inside HTML. Okay, there is another way, is nothing but add event listener, and you can fire the record from here, fire the events that you want from the child component, and you can capture it within the parent component by creating an add event listener inside the parent component. And you can actually create an add event listener within the constructor or either within the connected callback, and you can handle the overall event. So there were two ways, via HTML markup and using the add event listener as well. So that's what the answer that exactly I gave. Let's move on to the last question that we have today. Is that this one was a very tough one, not a very tough one, but it's based on the real-time scenarios. That we have a lightning data table where we are showing products that we are selling, and right now there are around 5 products in the table. And let's say two people, Ramu and Shamu. I have given Ramu and Shamu because he said you and me, but Ramu and Shamu are viewing at the table. So let's say Ramu sold one of the product to the customer. Hence, now table must have only 4 products. Now, as Shamu is looking at the table, he's still seeing 5 products. So, let's say you and me, okay, like the people you are watching this video, you and me, both of us are selling some kind of product. Okay, and I sold that product. Okay, still in your system you are able to see that, let's say this was a table which was showing the records, right? So within that table you are still seeing the 5 records, as you have not refreshed that page. Unless and until you don't refresh that page, you won't see that refreshed records. So how will you fix that scenario? If you see right now, still you are only able to see 5 records, while I have just deleted one record, I have converted one record, so I'm seeing 4 records. But in table you are seeing 5 records, and the reason is because you have not refreshed the page. And it's an actual issue, right? There can be a possibility that you can sold a record, or you can sold a particular thing which is already sold, right? So that's the reason why, what can we do in this particular scenario? Okay, because he won't always refresh it. You can't ask him to refresh it every second. So how will you fix that particular scenario? Okay, so this was the question. Now answer to this particular question is that I said that whenever okay, there will be let's say whenever some there is an update to that particular table. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire a platform event. Okay, and from that platform event, whatever platform event is there, I'm going to capture that platform event in the same component. And what I'm going to do is I'm assigning the values from platform event to track variable. Okay, and if it's a track and it's reactive, it's going to update the records with it without refresh. Okay, so basically as soon as, let's say, I do many kind of update, a platform event will be fired. Okay, and that will be captured within everybody's component. Okay, everybody's, you, me, everybody, and automatically whatever platform event, it will actually capture the record, capture the updated record. And that updated record that platform event is carrying, it will assign it the value from that platform event, that captured record, that updated record, it will assign it to a track variable. Okay, which will be visible to our on our screen. And that track variable, as it's reactive, automatically without even refreshing the page, you will see the updated records without refresh. So there is also refresh event answer to this question, but I give this particular answer. Okay, I can fire from platform event, I will capture the updated records, assign it to a track variable, and from the track variable automatically there will be a refresh, and then people will be able to see the updated record without actually refreshing it. So this was all the interview questions that were asked to me in my recent Salesforce interview. If you found this video helpful, I will request you to please like this video and subscribe to my channel.